Thank you very much, Glenn. How are we all this morning?
Good.
I'm going to start that again, okay? How are we all this morning? That's a little bit better. It's Monday morning, just before conference starts. Hopefully there's a little bit more energy than what I just heard, all right? Did you guys have a good weekend? Plenty of stuff going on. Who watched the Matildas? Yes? It's like, you can tell that this is super cheap and not the Rebel guys. Right? If I was working with the Rebel team, that would be, yeah, it would have been awesome. And then all you all talking about what you did to watch the Matildas, which is cool. Anyone see the Pacific Air Show on the weekend? Yes, yeah, I was down here this weekend watching the Pacific Air Show as well. It was a whole lot of fun. All right, well, hey, for those of you that don't know who I am, because I saw that there was a couple of hands that weren't here in February, really quickly. So my name's Cliff Morgan. I am an organisational psychologist by trade. I have a background in the military, and when I hung up my boots and rifle full time, went and studied to become a psychologist. I spend my time now really working with teams and leaders to help get the most out of their people, right, at work, applying psychology to help people perform as best they can and achieve their potential in the workplace. I've been working with SRG for it's about 4 or 5 years now. The time flies when you're having fun, and so yeah, we had a great session in February, and it was a whole lot of fun. And what I love seeing, I'm seeing the little stickers with your disc maps on laptops and things like that with a number of people, which is brilliant to see that you guys are, taking the concept and keeping it alive, all right? It's not just something that you heard me talk about in February and then you've gone and forgotten about it, right? You're still doing it. And I hope that the same is with today's message, so you'll hear what I'm going to share with you and you'll take it away and keep it alive. All right, cool. Just before we start, does everybody have a copy of your little booklets? All right, you can put your laptops away. You won't need those. You've got your booklets to take notes and do all that today. If you don't, if there's someone that doesn't, there is just a pile over the back there of some spare ones. So feel free to grab a couple of those, and then we will be good to go. Awesome. Well, I wanted to start today by just sharing a bit of a story. Now, this story starts in the 1900s in the foothills of the Dandenong Ranges down in Victoria. And back then, it was still kind of like the Wild West, and people were still busy trying to tame the bush by hand. They were sparsely populated, there wasn't too many people around. I want you to imagine a pub back then. Now, it's not much more than a wooden frame with some corrugated iron, but it sells cold beer to the lumberjacks, the miners, the farmers on the way home from work. And inside that pub, there's an old woodcutter who's just enjoying a nice cold beer. He's been doing it for a long time. He's pretty experienced. And up comes this young lumberjack. This guy is, kind of late to mid-20s. He's as fit and as strong as he's ever going to be, and he's full of bravado. And he comes up to the old lumberjack and I reckon I can cut down more trees than you in a single day. And the older lumberjack just takes another swig of his beer, looks the young man up and down, and then agrees to the challenge. They shake hands, agree on a time and place, and then go their different ways for the night. Now, the next morning, they both arrive on site at the agreed upon time with their axes in hand, and they shake hands and they get to work. Now, the younger lumberjack, he runs over to his first tree and starts swinging as hard and as fast as he can. The older lumberjack walks slowly over to the tree that he's going to attack, looks it up and down, pulls out a sharpening stone from his pocket, sits down and starts to sharpen his axe. And it's only when his axe is as sharp as he's happy with it, that he starts to swing and chop down that first tree. Now, the younger lumberjack, he fells his tree first, and as soon as it hits the ground, he runs across to the next one and starts swinging as hard and as fast as he can. Eventually, the older woodcutter, he fells his first tree, walks over to the next one, looks it up and down, pulls out his sharpening stone, sits down, and sharpens his axe. And again, it's only when his axe is sharp that he stands up and begins to chop down his tree. And that pattern repeats throughout the day. Every time the younger man fells a tree, he races to the next one, starts swinging as hard, as fast as he can. Every time the older gentleman fells a tree, he sits down, sharpens his axe before attacking the next one. And at the end of the day, the older woodcutter has cut down 10 trees to the younger man's 7. And the older woodcutter then goes home and chops more wood so that his family can cook and stay warm that night. While the younger man is so exhausted that he goes home, collapses into bed, and his wife has to chop wood. Now, while the younger man had worked faster, harder, and longer than the older woodcutter, the time it took for him to fell a tree grew throughout the day as his axe became dull and his muscles began to tire. The older woodcutter, however, each swing of his axe became more effective than the younger man's because he periodically sharpened his axe, and the breaks that he took while he was doing so allowed him to operate a consistent pace throughout the day. And at the end of the day, he was able to go home and care for his family, while the younger man was so exhausted that he couldn't engage with, care for, or support the ones he loved the most. And so my question to you today is, what are you doing to sharpen your axe? See, the pressure that we are under as leaders today is immense. There is pressure from above, pressure from below, pressure from external, and then pressure internally as we place ourselves under pressure to deal with the pressure that we're under, right? The pace of the world is constantly changing. And that the pace of that change is constantly speeding up. And we know all that. We've heard it all before, but it doesn't make dealing with it any easier necessarily. We're feeling the effects of pandemics and world events and wars more than we have ever in our lifetime. And this is kind of the context within which we lead at today. And who here works from home? Hands up. I know a lot of you spend a lot of time in stores and that sort of thing, but I imagine most of you will work from home. You know, traditionally we would go to work, we'd work our 8 hours, and then we'd leave and we'd go home, we'd recover from the day and enjoy the rest of our lives. There was a natural segmentation between work and home. And traditionally, our work was a lot more physical than it is today. Today, it's much more knowledge-based. All right? The tools of our trade are no longer axes, shovels, and plows. They're our mind, our knowledge, and our intellect. We use our brains much more than our bodies. And with the advances of technology, well, we're connected 24 hours a day, and we can work anywhere. Right? We can work from home. As a result of COVID-19, most of us had to work more from home. And that in itself is not a bad thing. I love the ability to work from home and the flexibility that it gives me. I mentioned that this week that I was down watching the air show. I was able to do work, all right, while watching C-17s and, Marine Ospreys and all sorts of aerobatics go on above me. It was absolutely brilliant. But the flexibility and the fact that we can and need to work from home is great, but it comes with consequences we also need to manage. If our work is much more mental and we're using our brains more than our bodies, then we have to think when we work. And thinking is very easy to do at home, and a lot of us are struggling to actually switch off and stop thinking at home. And so the pressure kind of continues to rise because we're always on, we're always working. The segmentation will become integration, and that becomes hard to manage. Add on top of this your role as area managers, right? So area managers can be one of the most rewarding roles that you will ever have. When you invest your time, energy, and effort into a struggling manager and they respond and they turn the store around and performance and profits increase, yes, it's one of the most rewarding things you'll ever get. It's also going to be one of the hardest roles that you'll ever have. Because yes, you are responsible for the high performers in your area, but you're also responsible for the managers that are struggling, the stores that are underperforming. You've got to be across recruitment, retention, rosters, merchandising, marketing, sales, stock control, cost control, store visits, meetings, mentoring, training. You've got to answer all the questions and provide all the needs to your people, and then you've got to answer all the hard questions that come from above as well. And kind of the pressure keeps on mounting. And so this is the world in which we lead. It's a bit like for you guys, I imagine, being one of those circus performers who spin plates. You guys seen those? All right? They get a plate and they spin it on top of a pole, and they spin it until they get it and let it go. And they'll get another one and they'll spin that until it's go, and then another one and another one. And they end up with like a dozen different plates that are spinning at the time. And I reckon, do you guys ever feel a bit like this? Yeah? I've seen a whole lot of nods. And so the circus performer is kind of running between, trying to spin, trying to keep all these plates spinning. And eventually one drops and a plate breaks. And the clown or the performer, he looks forlornly at the broken plate, and the crowd all says, "Oh," right? You know what? The consequences for the clown for breaking a plate and dropping something, they're not that great. It's a plate. It's broken. It's not going to affect the entire circus. But for you guys, if you drop a plate, if you drop the ball, it's not a plate that breaks. It might be a person. It's potentially an entire store or maybe an entire region that suffers. And so the pressure keeps on building. What I want you to do is just take a moment, and in the first page in your books there, what are all the responsibilities that you've got to juggle? What are all the plates that are there for you? All right? I'll give you 30 seconds to jot a whole lot of those down, and then I want you to turn to the person next to you, and I want to have a quick conversation. What are the things that you're juggling? What are the key things that you find are high pressure that you have to manage at the moment? All right, cool. Let's hold it there. All right, down the front here. This table, 3 things that you discussed. Call them out. Psychological well-being. Okay, good. Recruitment. Underperformance. Awesome. Table up the back. 3 more things. 3 different things. Strategic initiatives. Excellent. Financials. Yep. Emotional support. Good. Down the front here. 3 more things. Health and well-being. Say it. Personal development. Awesome. Culture. Great. 3 more. Safety. Standards. Time management. Awesome. Down the front here. 3 more things. Building knowledge. Brilliant.
Team retention.
Team retention. Yes. Training. Okay, so you can see I probably could have gone 5 for each table, and you would have had 5 different things. You can see all the different things that you guys have to wrestle with in your roles, okay? So if you're going to be successful leaders in today's environment, in your particular roles, if you are going to be the best leaders that you can be and help bring the best out of your people, you're going to be able to, or you're going to have to be able to perform under pressure, all right? If you want to raise and sustain your own performance, and if you want to raise and sustain the performance of your people across your area, then you need to be able to be on top of your game. You need to stay sharp. You need to bring your full capability to bear in your role. Here's the thing that I've learned about capability, right? The ability for you to employ your capability is determined by your capacity. Your ability to employ your capability is determined by your capacity. What do I mean by that? Well, your capability, it is everything that you bring to your role. It's your knowledge, your skills, your experience, your expertise. Your capacity is the level of energy that you have, your ability to focus and your stamina. See, if you are high energy and have high capacity, then you are able to focus on what you need to, and you have the stamina to sustain that focus in your role. If you have a low capacity, you are drained of energy, you don't have the energy you need to do your work, all right? You don't have the stamina to sustain your focus. You won't engage well with your people, you won't make great decisions, and you won't be able to perform in your role. Let me give you a visual that might help, all right? So we've got here our capability cup, all right? And every day we start with a certain level of capacity, all right? The water filling the cup is like the emotional energy, right? Our capacity that we've got there. Now, on the right here in this table, okay, we've got the demands in the workplace. So we've got some decision making. As leaders, you've got to make some decisions, right? We've got people, you've got to invest in people, you've got to deal with people, whether that's conflict, whether that's training and mentoring, whatever it is, right? We've got some training side of things here. You could have many different cups up here with all the different things that you said. And on the left-hand side here, we have some things that help us recover and manage our capacity. All right, so we've got a little bit of sleep, we've got a little bit of exercise, we've got some time with friends. And every day when you walk into the workplace, you start with your level of capacity, but you have got to make some decisions. So you're pouring some time, energy, focus into that cup. You have to deal with people, right? You're pouring some in there. And you've got to do some training. And as I said, many other cups, you're pouring your energy, your focus into all of them. And when you come home from work and you get a good night's sleep, what you're doing is you are replenishing your capacity. When you do some exercise and make healthy life choices, you are getting a little bit more into your capacity cup. And when you spend time with friends, all right, again, there could be many different cups up here on this side of the equation that help you manage your capacity. But it's engaging in those things that allow you to replenish your capacity. So that when you go back the next day, what you can do is you can make some more decisions, deal with some more people, conduct some more training, and meet all the demands in your workplace. Here's the thing. If you don't replenish your capacity, you can't pour from an empty cup. Unless you're making sure that you are fostering, cultivating, and managing your energy and your capacity, then you won't have anything to give to your work. You won't be able to meet the requirements of your role. And so managing your capacity becomes super important. Does that make sense to people? Yeah? Good. Your ability to employ your capability is determined by your capacity. And so to manage that capacity, really what you need to do is focus, the key to that is managing your energy, right? And energy is this really interesting concept. If you ask a scientist, then they will define energy as the ability to do work. And there's many different forms of energy. There's light, there's motion, there's heat, there is electrical energy, there's chemical energy. There's many different forms. And you can kind of broadly group those into two groups. We have potential energy and we have kinetic energy. Potential energy is energy that is not being used yet. It has the potential to be used, but it's not being used yet. It's stored. And then you have kinetic energy, which is active. It's being used, it's doing the work. All right? And in order for energy to be used, there needs to be a process whereby potential energy is converted into kinetic energy. There needs to be a conversion process, a process where the energy that is stored and stationary is activated and released so it can be turned into movement and motion. If you take this piece of wood, for instance, now most of you, if I asked you to describe this piece of wood, how would you do it? How would you describe this piece of wood? Smooth. Okay, cool. How would you describe this piece of wood? Okay, give me a different one. You can't just copy her. How would you describe the piece of wood? Solid. Okay, cool. And if I went around and got you to describe it in different ways, how many people would describe this as energetic? The reality is this is full of energy. It's full of potential energy, stored energy, just waiting to be released and used. It's not until we burn it that we release the energy that's stored and transform it, convert it into heat. All right? We can use heat then to warm us, to boil water, to do all sorts of different things. But it's the process of burning that releases the potential energy that's stored in this piece of wood that allows us to use it. Okay? And so when we think about energy and using energy, we've got to transform potential energy into kinetic energy. And the reality is that it's exactly the same for people. Every single person, every single group of people is full of potential. You might say that they're full of potential energy. But we just need to release that energy. We need to harness it. We need to direct it towards the goal. And you say, well, how do you do that? I want to say it's through leadership. Ultimately, leadership is the process by which we activate the potential in others, right? When you think about it, leadership, there's 1,000 different definitions out there. They all boil down to some version of this, all right? It's influencing a group of people in order to move towards and achieve a common goal, all right? But the very fact that you are aiming at a goal means that you're not there yet. And so there needs to be a change that happens. Okay? So, you two gents, I'll come up here. Come down here. All right, what's your name? Dave?
Callan.
Callan, all right, stand over there, Callan. All right, Dave, you are currently standing at point A. All right, Callan, I want you to lead Dave over here to point B. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Go.
Come on, Dave, come with me.
How'd he do? Good? Give him a round of applause. Thanks, guys. You thought it was going to be more than that, didn't you? It was a pretty simple demonstration. But I want you to just take a moment. This is the most, if you could boil leadership down to the most simple example, that would be it. Leading someone from point A to point B. But let's actually break down what was actually happening there. All right? Dave was standing at point A. And he was stationary. He wasn't doing anything. But Dave needed to get to point B, which was over here. So that was a change in location. And if Dave had stayed as he was never going to change location. He had the potential to move over there, but he didn't actually do it. Now, what prompted Dave to activate his potential for movement to actually change location? It was Callan, all right? He kind of had the awkward hand movement and the not really confident, come on, Dave, all right? But essentially, it was Callan's leadership that sparked as the catalyst for Dave to actually act and move towards the goal. And really, you can think about leadership as the ability to do that, to activate the potential energy, right? And in one sense, what Callum was actually doing was transferring his energy to Dave. So I've got a colleague of mine, he's a former Special Forces soldier named Graham Connolly. He describes leadership as a process of energy transference. Okay? And I reckon he's onto something. See, in order for any sort of potential energy to be transformed and converted into kinetic energy that can actually be used, right, there needs to be a transfer of energy. If we go back to this piece of wood, okay, so we said before, it's full of potential energy to burn and to provide heat. But is it going to burn by itself? Is it going to spontaneously combust and start burning? I hope not. If it does, I'm throwing it to you. All right? But what I have to do is I've got to add externally a flame or another heat source in order for it to start burning. I've got to take another energy source, because heat is a type of kinetic energy. I've got to add that here in order to release and activate the potential energy that's inside the wood. It's only then when it burns that it will then release its heat and release its energy. And it's exactly the same with people. Okay? It's only when a leader transfers some of their energy and through their leadership that it activates and releases the energy that's in people that they actually start to act, to move, to make a change and actually move towards whatever the goal is that they're working towards. And so energy transference creates energy transformation. Energy transformation unlocks potential. Now here's the thing, for you guys as leaders, if you're going to lead and be successful, what you need to do is actually transfer your energy to other people. Now you might call it inspiring people, you might call it motivating people, you might call it influencing people, call it what you will, but successful and effective leadership is transferring the leader's energy to people so that they can move towards, they can do the work, they can move towards the goal. All right? But as I said before, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're not managing your energy, if you're not managing your capacity, then you won't have energy to transfer to your people. Does that make sense? So what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about how do we manage our energy, how do we restore our capacity so that we can be the best leaders that we want to be. You ready to dive in? Okay, cool. Let's go. The thing that you need to remember is that it's so often the things that get us through the tough times that we stop doing when times get tough. It's the things that get us through the tough times that we stop doing when times get tough. You think about it. Pressure gets on. What's your name? Sorry? Jim. So Jim, pressure gets on, workload starts to grow, timelines and deadlines start to increase. What do? What's the first thing you do?
I assess how much time I've got to do, where my deadlines lie.
Yeah.
And then work out what I'm capable of getting done in the right time.
Okay. Good. So you do the assessment piece then. All right. But in terms of behaviorally, what do you start to do? Freak out. Yeah. And then you start to work longer. Yeah? Longer hours, try and work harder. And so the first thing that Jim would start to do, and it'd be the same for any of us, is that generally we start working later at night. We put an extra couple of hours in at the end of the day, which means we often get less sleep, which means we wake up more tired the next morning. We're less likely to go and do some exercise or make some healthy choices in the morning. All right. And therefore we go to work and we're kind of already a little bit drained, but the workloads are so big that we want to stay and we want to eat lunch at our desk so that we keep churning through the work. And so we either skip lunch or we grab something fast and nasty, which kind of sits in our stomach and we go through the afternoon. And our energy is low, and then we get home and we still haven't been as productive as we wanted to throughout the day, so we work longer at night and the cycle keeps on going. But how many people know that it's a good night's sleep, it's maintaining your exercise, It's doing all the positive, healthy choices that help you have the energy you need to focus on the work and be most productive. Right? So a lot of things that we're going to talk about today, some of them are going to be really simple. Some of them are going to be things that you know. What I challenge you to do is don't disregard the simple, because the simple is often the most powerful. All right? So let's get into it. First thing I want to talk about is your foundations, right? And again, none of this will be new to you. Exercise, nutrition, and sleep. Now, the reality is, we mentioned before that our brains are part of our bodies. Now, all the work that we do, we use our brain more than our body. We do mental work rather than physical work. But here's the thing. If our bodies are run down, then our brains are going to be run down too. At a biochemical level, right, our brains cannot function properly. So what we need to do is maintain our health. And these are the three basics, the foundational basics that allow us to do that. Now, who here does enough exercise? I've got 4 hands in the room, all right? And that's not to be critical at all, but it's the reality is that most of us think we should be doing a whole lot more exercise than what we do. When it comes to exercise, what I'm not talking about is doing 2 hours in the gym every day. And a lot of people think that, if I exercise regularly, that's what I've got to do. The reality is that, or anyone here over the age of 50, apart from Glenn, all right? So Glenn, for you gents up the back, right? 2 20-minute walks a week is all you need to do, and your life expectancy starts to rise. So that retirement's going to be even longer, Glenn. That's all you need. It doesn't need to be massive. For me, at the moment, exercise often looks like either 15 minutes with a kettlebell or 5 minutes with a skipping rope if I'm really strapped. Okay? But I've learned the importance of exercise. Let me tell you the story. Up the back of there, at the end of the day, you'll get the opportunity to purchase a book. I wrote a book last year. And I made the decision that in order to write the book, what I was going to do was sacrifice some of my exercise and use that time for writing time. I was going to get up early. I was going to write for an hour and a half each day. And that's how I was going to write my book. And then once I was done, I'd get back into my exercise. 3 months in, I was on struggle street. I couldn't focus in my work or my writing. I had a really flat mood. I couldn't shift my mood. I was really snappy. I was snapping at my kids. And I was totally demotivated and really starting to struggle. And when I look back at it, really I was on the downward slope to depression. I went and got some help. But one of the first things I did, when I spoke to my psychologist, was that we increased the amount of exercise that I was doing. And I went from 1 training session a week to 3 training sessions a week. And within 7 days of increasing that level of exercise, things had totally flipped for me. My focus was back. My motivation was back. I was able to shift my mood. I wasn't snappy at my kids. I felt so much better. And all that to say that I teach this stuff. I know it. I know it back to front. I know it better than all of you. And I still fell into the trap of letting it slide, not looking after the foundations in order to achieve the goal and get the work done. And I pay the consequences for it. Exercise is awesome. And as I said kind of to you guys, framing things for you today, the pressure's on, right? In the current context, the pressure is on. If you're going to be successful leaders, you need to deal with the pressure. But your pressure is not so great as the pressure that was faced by the guys in World War II. Who here's watched Band of Brothers? Couple people? If you haven't, I highly encourage you, go and watch Band of Brothers. Now, one of the key characters in Band of Brothers was Major Dick Winters. who was Band of Brothers is basically a short series where it follows a particular company, Easy Company, from the US paratroopers as they jumped into Europe and went kind of through, the landings at Normandy and the liberation of Europe. And they follow this particular company. The commander of that company was Major Dick Winters. Now, Major Dick Winters was a real person. All of the characters in Band of Brothers were real people. But Major Dick Winters, he's kind of portrayed in this really positive light. But he was kind of like a Superman, all right? They call him the monastic monk in some of the different commentaries around his particular life. But he was an absolute believer in the importance of physical fitness, to the point where in the lead up in the training, they would, do all the physical training all throughout the day, and then he would go and he would run an extra couple of miles at night to get an extra level of fitness on top. And even when he was in Europe and he had jumped into Europe and he was in combat, whenever there was a day where they weren't actually fighting, he would go and train. He would go for a couple mile runs, or he would do some calisthenics, whatever it was, to maintain his physical fitness. And he actually has this great quote where he says, moral courage has its foundations in physical fitness. And when he talks about moral courage, it's around good decision-making under pressure. That's what he's talking about. For you guys to be able to make good decisions under pressure, you've got to have kind of physical stamina to be able to maintain your focus, to not be distracted by everything else, and have the energy to keep on showing up and get to work. So in your books there, you've got, you can see on, page 3, you've got space there to rate your current level of exercise out of 10. Okay? And then what I want you to do is have a think about, where do you want it to be? If you're currently at a 5, where do you want it to be? You want it to be a 7. Okay, cool. What's 2 or 3 things, right, you can write down? It might even only be one thing. But what are the things that you can do to get from where you are now to where you want to be? Again, what I want you to do is spend 30 seconds writing, turn to the person next to you, have a quick discussion about what you wrote down. All right, hold it there. So 5 people, okay? 5 people. What do you want to start doing? What do you need to improve when it comes to exercise? Volunteers? If not, I'll go back to my military instructor days and I'll volunteer people. Jim?
Give it some focus.
Give it some focus. Yeah.
Probably understand, like what you're saying, is the exercise will give you better clarity in mind.
Yep.
Give it a go. Focus on it. See how it goes.
So when you say give it some focus, what does that mean? What does that look like for you?
Scheduling it in.
Scheduling it in?
Other things that probably should be doing.
Yep.
Watching TV or
Okay. Awesome. Cool. 4 more. Who's next? Commit to it? Yeah, brilliant. Right? Unless you commit, unless you make a commitment, set a goal, tell some people you're going to do it and actually really commit to it, you'll never start. Awesome. Who's next? Make it fun. Awesome. How are you going to make it fun? Involve you. Brilliant. Absolutely love it. Yeah, I get my 2 daughters involved. If ever I'm doing anything, I'll try and get them, come on, you do it too, alongside. And here's the fun thing, right? They'll be the ones that keep you accountable, right? Once you get them involved, they'll be like, hey, Dad, you haven't done your push-ups today. All that sort of fun jazz, okay? All right, 3 more. No, 2 more.
Just show up.
Just show up. Brilliant, okay? Just show up on that one. It brings to mind Bear Grylls, yeah? So in one of his books, he talks about, with exercise, the 3-minute rule. And that's it. He has to show up and he has to complete the first 3 minutes of his workout every single day. Now, he gives himself to quit and to not work out after that 3 minutes if he's not feeling right. But what he knows is that if he completes 3 minutes of his workout, the motivation comes, and 90% of the time he actually finishes and completes the workout. So just showing up is so important. So often when I'm talking about motivation, a lot of people think motivation is a precursor to action. I describe it as a byproduct of action. Take action and motivation to finish will come. All right, so just show up is brilliant. One more. Get to sleep early. Yes, absolutely love it. A particular book that was written by a friend of mine, he says the hardest thing about being disciplined and exercising, all that sort of stuff, is actually going to bed on time, going to bed early. If you can do that, then you're giving yourself the best chance to do the exercise in the morning, if morning time is when you want to do your exercise. Brilliant. Okay, cool. Nutrition. Okay, again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because you all know it, right? As a Western society, generally what we should probably do is eat a little bit less red meat, a little bit less carbohydrates and sugar, and a little bit more fresh fruit and vegetables, right? Generally speaking. We all know that. We just need to do it, right? And it can be hard and needs preparation and all those sorts of things. The big one I want to focus on is water. Okay, water. This stuff. The vast majority of people, I think it's something like above 80%, live chronically dehydrated. Chronically dehydrated. They never get enough water. The reality is that, what is it, 70% of our bodies is made up of water. And if we are tired, if we are dehydrated, each single individual cell is only operating at like 70% capacity if it's dehydrated. And you think about how many cells that we've got, and we add that all up, right? If they are all dehydrated, they can't function properly. The mitochondria can't operate properly. They can't generate the energy that we're actually talking about. So if you want more energy, drink more water. It's probably the simplest thing that you can do. What I'll do at home is I have one of those 600ml bottles of water, and that just kind of lives in the fridge. And first thing I do is I'll drink one of those to start my day off. So I start fully hydrated. That gives me a good start to the day, right? And if you look at any of the top, whether it's Tim Ferriss, whether it's Andrew Huberman, whether it's any of the guys that kind of the top productivity, high performance guys that talk about routines in the morning routines, they will always include having a couple of glasses of water. Now, Andrew Huberman talks about putting some salt in there as well, and you can do all sorts of things around the high performance tweak, but just drink water, and it's the simplest thing that you can do to have more energy, right? So make sure that you keep drinking water. Make sure that you're looking after your nutrition. It's like if you want to kind of put it into an auto kind of analogy, you put crap fuel into your vehicle, what's going to happen? You get crap performance, right? You put the premium fuel in the car, you're going to win the race. So put the premium fuel in your vehicle so that you can win your race. Final one is sleep. Who here gets enough sleep? Right? 2 people, or a couple people. So the World Health Organization says that we should get 7 to 8 hours sleep every night. Sleep, again, is a really simple one, but it is one of the most important ones. Who here's ever hallucinated because they didn't get enough sleep? Yep, one other person. I remember in my basic training, we were doing defense X. So we were digging trenches, essentially, by hand with a little ET tool. So this had a shovel thing about this big on the end, and that's what we're using to dig full pits and trenches, right, for an entire week. And we would get maybe 3 hours sleep a night, and we would just spend the rest of the time just digging. And it had a whole, purpose to doing that and teaching us where our limits were and all sorts of different things. But at the end, what they did was they simulated an attack on us in our position. So we dug all these trenches. We're sitting in the trenches. We're waiting and called to. And I'm sitting there. I was on the machine gun. Okay. So as you have the machine gun, when you hold a machine gun, it's got its bipod legs out the front. I've got one hand on the butt, and one hand on the pistol grip. And I'm sitting here like this, and I'm looking out. And then all of a sudden I start seeing things move, like shadows move, and all of a sudden there's this great big castle out in front of me. And I'm going, what the heck is that? And I closed my eyes and shook my head and looked down, and then I could see my hands folded like this in front of me. I could feel them holding the machine gun, but I could see them doing this. I'm like, oh man, this is not good. I just need some sleep.
Holding a machine gun.
Holding a machine gun. Yeah, don't sleep while holding a machine gun. That's bad juju. But that's kind of, probably where I got to the point where I'd really started feeling the effect, like visibly feeling the effects. There's a reason why sleep deprivation is a torture mechanism, because everything starts to go haywire, all right? And in my role as a reserve psychologist in the Air Force, I've been lucky enough to supervise some of the conduct after capture training, where we put special forces through in the ADF to train them how do I deal with, being held prisoner of war. And again, sleep deprivation is something that we train them to withstand. But you debrief them afterwards and you hear some of the hallucinations and the things that were going through their head when they were sleep deprived. It gets pretty scary. The reality is that if you get 1 night of sleep that is less than 6 hours, the research shows that your cognitive performance drops by about 30%. Your ability to use your brain, which is your primary tool in your workplace, drops by about 30%. Now go 3 nights of less than 6 hours sleep, and for some people, for the majority of people, your cognitive performance is now at or below. So at or whichever way, below or above, whichever way you look at it, but having a blood alcohol limit of 0.05. So you may as well be drunk at work. Now, many of us, or hopefully none of us, would ever dream of rocking up to work drunk. But so many people may as well be, because they don't get enough sleep. So making sure that you do the things that you need to get a good night's sleep. 1, going to bed early enough. 2, doing the basic hygiene stuff. Don't watch TV right before you go to sleep. Have a bit of a sleep routine, an end of day routine. Because what actually happens if you start doing the same things over and over at the same time, your body, as you start to get into that routine, your body starts to shut down. And you can fall asleep within 2 minutes. Generally, I can sleep anywhere. I've spent enough time sleeping on the ground with a root in my side and a rock for a pillow that I can sleep anywhere. When I hop into bed, because I go through this routine generally, it takes me about 30 seconds to go to sleep. Frustrates the hell out of my wife, because that's when she wants to, connect and, do the relational thing. But often I'm just, that can be you guys too. All right. So again, I want you to take a couple of minutes. So spend 30 seconds for both nutrition and for both sleep. Where are you currently? Score yourself out of 10. Where do you want to be? What do you need to change in order to get from where you are now to where you want to be? Let's go. All right, let's bring it back. So again, 5 different people. What's something you need to do or change when it comes to your nutrition and sleep? Happy to volunteer people.
Nutrition, I put eat in moderation.
Okay, eat in moderation. Great. So reducing meal size rather than, just don't eat your kids' leftovers, right, all the time. That is a simple fix to that one. Somebody else had their head up. Say again, sorry? Calm down on snacking. Yes. All right. Calm down on snacking. Either don't snack or take healthy snacks to work. Right. Cool. That's 2, 3 more.
Watch the sweets.
Watch the sweets. Yep. Do you know simply by putting a lid on a bucket of M&Ms, it reduces the M&M consumption by about 50%. So I think it was whether it was Google or it was one of the really big companies. What they used to do is they had a arrangement with M&Ms. They had these big buckets of M&Ms that used to be in the workplace. And they did this experiment where they simply put the lid on the M&Ms rather than leave it open, and it reduced consumption by 50%. Simple things that you can do that really have a big impact. All right, 2 more people.
3 liters.
Sorry? 3 liters of water. Excellent. You're going to be fully flushed out, which is awesome. Don't skip meals. Great. Unless you're doing it for intermittent fasting persons or plan and all that sort of stuff. Yes, but don't skip meals. Brilliant. Awesome. Cool. Again, guys, you guys know this stuff. It is simple stuff. It's not hard to do, or it's not hard to, it is simple things to do. Sometimes simple things are hard to execute. All right, consistently. And that really is the key. It's consistency over time, which is the key to sustained performance, right? You can make the change, and if you only do it for a short time, that's great. But if you go back into the old habits, then the negative benefits are going to start accumulating. Whereas if you are consistent in the positive choices that you make, the positive benefits then accumulate. All right? Cool. So all of that lays the foundation for you to manage your energy. The next thing that we'll talk about is kind of how do you manage your energy through the workday? How do you do that, and how do you do that well? And what I want to do is draw on a piece of research that Super Retail Group actually has a connection to. So who here remembers Holly Brailsford? A couple of people up the back, yeah? A couple of people around the room. So Holly was a colleague of mine through Masters. We went through Masters together. And this piece of research, Holly was part of and involved in. And what they were doing was helping or looking at how do people manage work both through the workday, manage energy, through the workday, but also outside of work, and how do people recover from work. And the piece around the workday, what they did was they actually monitored people. So like there was a biological component where they measured the parasympathetic nervous system. And so cortisol levels and things like that, heart rate and stress and different markers. And what they also did was they had people carrying around a beeper. And every time that beeper went off, people had to kind of record in a little journal what they were doing and the different things, how they were managing their energy. And what they found was that there are 2 major strategies that people use to manage their energy and their workload throughout the day. There was work-based strategies and there was micro breaks. So work-based strategies was really around kind of task switching, or making sure that they were aligning their tasks to a time of day and when their energy was. The whole idea or theory behind work-based strategies is I'm going to be doing work for as long as possible, and so how do I manage my energy throughout that day? So if you're kind of a morning person, you've got more energy, you're kind of doing those, doing sort of energy, tasks that require a whole lot of energy at the front end of the day. Some people have more energy at the back end of the day. And so they do those particular tasks at the back end. So they were making decisions around that. But what they were doing was, there was like, how do I get the most productivity out of my day? And I'm going to plan my day accordingly. And once I am engaged in an activity and I start to feel my energy get drained and I feel tired and I'm not being able to focus and all that sort of thing, they'll switch tasks and they'll do something else. And so they might start filing emails, they might start answering emails, they might go and do the shredding or do something like that. But they're still working, they're still doing things that need to get done. And then once they've had a little bit of a mental break in that sense, they go back to their original task. And so they manage their energy at work by switching tasks and doing that sort of thing. But what they're trying to do is stay productive and stay working the entire time in order to get through the workload that they need to. Who here can relate to that? Yep, a couple people around the room. Now, the other main type of strategy was really what they called micro breaks. And it was where people would focus for a period of time and then they would step away from their work for 5 to 10 minutes. It's only a short little break, not taking extended lunch breaks or anything like that, but it's a short little break. And it might be to go for a walk around outside. It might be to go and make a cup of coffee. It might be to go and have a conversation with a friend. The key to that one is that the conversation that you're having is not about work. And the theory behind this one is that you're giving your brain a break. Now, how many people knows that if you go to the gym and I ask you to do 100 bicep curls, probably picking up the dumbbells and just going 100 straight, you're going to struggle. But if you pick it up, do 10, pop it down, have a minute break, pick it up, do another 10, pop it down, have a break, and you break it up, you're giving your muscles a little bit of a rest, a break in between, you're able to actually do a whole lot more. And your brain is just like that. Your brain is an organ, it's a muscle. And so if you're using it constantly, it gets tired more quickly. If you go back to the parable that I started today with about the younger man, yes, he worked harder, longer, faster, but the time it took for him to do tasks also grew longer. He got more tired and exhausted at the end of the day. And so the theory then behind micro breaks is that people actually use them to maintain a more consistent level of energy throughout the day. They're able to have a better quality of focus when they do focus at their tasks, if they step away. Now, again, you think about what was some of the kind of inherent opportunities to have a little bit of a break when you're in the office traditionally? What might they be? In between meetings. So simply just walking from one meeting downstairs and along the hall to another one, right, potentially was an opportunity, particularly if you were talking to someone about what they did on the weekend, you're kind of having a little bit of a mental break as you move rooms and do all those sorts of things. Now, not always the case if that you are thinking about, trying to solve a problem and preparing for the next meeting while you're doing it. You don't necessarily get that break, but a lot of the time you did. What else? Sitting down and having lunch together. You are actually going and making coffee and bumping into a friend, and you actually, as you make your coffee or you get your coffee, you actually get to have that conversation where you're not actually talking about work. Whereas if we're working from home these days, all right, how many of us just do back to back to back to back to back to back in meetings? I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding around the room, and we don't actually get a break. And that thing called Zoom fatigue kicks in, right? There's a whole lot of research that's coming out now around the quality of people's decisions at the end of a day, going back-to-back meetings with Zoom and different things like that. So what I don't want to do is demonize work-based strategies, because they can actually be really effective when it comes to reducing a workload. And if you are under pressure, then sometimes we need to do that. Because for those of us that are really goal-oriented and really kind of motivated to achieve goals, and you love seeing your task list and crossing things off your task list. Now, I'm seeing some smiles around the room. There's like, yeah, I can relate to that. The work-based strategies can be really effective in doing that and getting to the end of the day and seeing that done, or being able to get a big project and cross it off your task list. That in and of itself can be really motivating and therefore energizing for you. So they can be really good. But at the same time, you're still using that muscle the entire time. And over the long term, micro breaks are often much better in terms of maintaining consistent focus. So work-based strategies are often really good in the short term, but again, thinking long term, micro breaks can often be more effective. Does that make sense? All right, what I want you to do is turn to your books. I want you to first think about, what do you do currently to manage your energy? Top box there. And then I want you to switch to what's something that you could do. Now that I've just shared with you the difference between work-based strategies and micro breaks, what are the different things that you could do to manage your energy more intentionally than what you already are? Again, I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that, write that down, and then what I want you to do is turn to the person next to you, have a bit of a conversation as you engage. And I'll pop around the different tables as we have that conversation. Let's just buzz around the tables again. All right, so down the front here, what were some of the things that you spoke about? Someone pipe up? Taking a lunch break. Switching off. Yeah, taking a lunch break is really important. We had a couple of different conversations about lunch breaks. The first one, switch off and give yourself a mental break is really good. A great opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with somebody else, build relationship, build trust, build all those other things that are really good for leadership in the workplace. Lunch breaks are also really important because remember we were talking about our brain being our primary tool these days. And our brain operates on blood sugar, right? Or energy sources. And if we skip lunch, particularly if we eat breakfast in the morning and then skip lunch, what we've done is we've activated our metabolism, and so our body starts churning through the quick access carbohydrates as an energy source. And if we eat breakfast, we make it activate that mechanism, so we're doing that all morning, and then we run out of quick release energy source or quick access energy source. And we're kind of ready for lunch. But if we skip lunch, then we don't get a refuel, essentially. So in the afternoon, we feel so much tired, more drained, because our brain has got less, sugars and things that are there. It's really interesting if we are doing, or if you're doing something like intermittent fasting, where you actually don't eat breakfast, your body starts using energy in a different way. There's different metabolic, thank you, metabolic mechanisms that are at play, and your brain uses a different energy source. And so quite often people will say when they're doing intermittent fasting, they have a greater level of clarity in the afternoon or as the fast goes on. Again, if you eat breakfast, really important you eat lunch. If you don't eat breakfast, not so much of an issue. But really interesting to recognise how all that sort of stuff plays out. Right, up the back here. What else did we talk about?
We spoke a little bit about switching off between home and work as well.
Yes.
And on days when we didn't do a proper switch off, especially having kids at home, you notice a difference in from family.
Yep.
Especially working from home, logging on, typing all some of the things at home, and just run straight into it. Right.
Yeah, brilliant, so important. When I'm coaching people and helping them kind of go to the next level of performance, so often what I talk about is what are the different routines that you have. We spoke a little bit about morning routines already today, but I reckon we should have an end of day routine before we go to sleep, but also an end of work routine. What's your end of work? How do you shut down from the day? And then kind of we're talking about the natural segmentation between home and work is kind of lost. But what's the routine that kind of allows you to switch off and kind of detach from work? And that is so important. Who here's seen the Third Space video by Dr. Andrew Fraser? Okay, what I want everybody to do is in the back page in your book, you've got a blank page for notes. I want you to write down the Third Space, Dr. Adam Fraser. And I want you to just type Third Space into YouTube. It's a great little video. It's only about 4 minutes long, and it's talking about exactly that. It's about what do you do between the third space that's in between, whether it's different meetings, whether it's going home, whatever it is, that allows you to kind of recover and reset. And so that becomes really important. Awesome. Down the front here, what's some of the things you guys spoke about?
Consistent micro breaks.
Consistent micro breaks. Yes? Did you talk about what specific activities you would do for micro breaks?
Disconnect from work and take a little bit of a walk, get some fresh air.
Go for a walk? Yeah, go for a walk outside. I did a particular project with Air Services Australia at one point many years ago, and one of the things that I used to do, because I was just kind of like sitting in front of the computer and just churning through research and all that sort of stuff, and so several times a day I would walk out of the building, go for a walk around the block. It took me about 4 minutes, 5 minutes or something like that, and then I'd come back to my desk and sit down and just get some sunlight. We spoke somewhere around about sunlight. Again, the benefits to just getting unfiltered sunlight. So even this, if you walk outside and get unfiltered sunlight, it's going to be more beneficial than just looking out there. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens in the brain. If you want more about that, jump on Andrew Huberman, Human Lab podcast, and he'll tell you all about that sort of stuff. That's important. Cool. This table.
Also during enough
100%. Okay. So as part of your micro breaks, what you might do is go and get some water. Coffee and Red Bull probably won't have the same amount of impact. Will for a short period of time, but not a long one. What about down here? Finish on time. Okay, cool. Yeah. Yep. Important one. All right. What I want you to do, probably got about 2 minutes before morning tea is ready. What I want you to do as a table is brainstorm what are all the different activities that you could do for micro breaks. All right, and I want everybody to write them down. So you all walk away with a list of different things that you could do to take a micro break. All right, let's go. Cool. So do we have some good conversations over morning tea? Yep. Do I need to start that one again? Did we have some good conversations over morning tea? Yes. That's better, all right? Remember, we're talking about energy and energy transference. Just while I think about that, right? This wasn't part of today's presentation that I didn't plan to share this, but think about this, right? As leaders, you should be thermostats, not thermometers. You should be thermostats, not thermometers. When you walk into a room, you should not be reflecting the temperature of the room, you should be setting it. A thermometer tells you what the temperature is. A thermostat determines what the temperature is. And as leaders, when you are transferring your energy, what you need to be is setting the energy in the room. And so you walk in, and if you are drained, if you are low capacity, low energy, people will look to you and you will automatically suck the energy and life out of that room. If you come in and you've predetermined that, hey, I'm a high energy, we're going to do this, we're going to be motivated, genuinely, not inauthentically, you will pick the energy from everybody else up. Remember, energy transference creates energy transformation. Energy transformation is what unlocks potential in people. So set the temperature in the room. Cool? All right, let's go. Hey, so remember I was talking about how we manage energy through the work day. How do we manage energy as we are at work, doing our work? But the reality is when we come home from work, whether or not we are working at home or we've been doing store visits and out on the road, when we finish work, what we need to do is recover from work. Any elite athlete knows that the recovery needs to be one of their top priorities. I was coaching at one point a girl who was going for selection in the Commonwealth Games. She was a runner and she was aiming to be selected in the Commonwealth Games. And we had a whole lot of different goals that she had and training systems there. She was things around the training that she needed to do. There were things around the races that she needed to run and the time she needed to run in those races. But then there was a third list, and it was all about her recovery. Because it's the recovery that allows the athletes to sustain their performance. They can push themselves really hard during training. They can push themselves really hard on race day. But they only can do that day after day and back up day after day if they recover from the exertion that they've given the previous day on training. A couple of years ago, I ran a marathon, and as part of that, inspiring myself and learning about everything that I need to do in order to run a marathon, I was following a bunch of runners in their social media and kind of their worlds and learning about their stories. There was one guy who prioritized recovery so much, he said this: if I walk more than about 4,000 steps on a recovery day, then I've overworked. And so he was really intentional and active about tracking his recovery and making sure that he rested his body so that he could back up and do the performance piece the next day. You look at any of the swimmers, right? And you look at their lifestyle and their routine. They'll train for 4 hours, 5 hours a day, morning and afternoon. And then they have a big 2-hour sleep in the middle, right? And they make sure they get to bed early so that their body recovers so that they can get up early and do the training thing the next day. Recovery is so important. Now, normally, I said traditionally, there was a natural segmentation between work and our home life. And today that segmentation's become integration, and so therefore the natural ability for us to recover has been reduced. The reality is that we need to be more intentional about prioritizing our recovery given the flexible arrangements that we have with our work now. Now, most people, when they think from recovery from work, I need to go and have a holiday. And it's true, holidays are great. They do allow you great time to switch off, rest, relax, and recover. But here's what the research tells us. If you're at a particular point of burnout or level of stress before you go away on holiday, and you have a 2-week holiday where you fully switch off, you fully recover, it takes you 2 weeks, only 2 weeks, to return to that same level of stress and burnout that you were prior. Now, we can't take 2-week holidays every fortnight. It would be nice. But what that means is we can't rely on our holidays to help us recover from work. We need to prioritize holidays. We need to have them. We need to make sure that we use them to recover. But what we actually need to do is we need to weave recovery activities through our days, our weeks, our months. And it's when we weave regular recovery activities through our days and weeks and months that we're able to sustain that level of performance that we're talking about. So what are the things that we can do? What are these activities we've got to weave through our weeks? When it comes to recovery from work, the latest research in this particular area around kind of work-life balance and energy management and well-being, it focuses on the recovery piece, and really it talks about these three elements, which is what I want to spend a bit of time. It's detachment, relaxation, and mastery. So talking about detachment, what does detachment mean? Throw it over to you. Disengage. That's right, detach. What detachment is our ability to detach from work, to stop thinking about work. All right, to disengage from work. Really hard when all of us have got these things in our pockets 24 hours and we're connected to our emails with just a touch of a button and all that sort of stuff. But so important. Just like we were talking about managing our energy by having a micro break and giving our brain a moment to have a break during the workday, this is kind of like the next level up from that. We need to be able to detach each day. You need to be able to detach for longer periods of time, not just micro breaks, but significant breaks, so that our brain replenishes, so that our brain switches off and allows us to go to sleep. Right? We talk about sleep before. Who here goes to sleep but then wakes up at like 2 o'clock in the morning and is thinking about work? A couple of people? Yeah. All right. So that is a symptom of an inability to detach. What's actually going on there is the elevated cortisol levels in your brain are not having adequate enough time to kind of cycle through and be flushed out of the body, which means when you go to sleep and you drop into deep sleep, then afterwards you pop back up and you go into REM sleep, and you're kind of doing sleep waves like this as you go in and out of REM sleep. And REM sleep is a higher level of activity in your brain than deep sleep or light sleep. All right, that's when you dream. Okay, your brain's doing all sorts of different weird and wonderful things. But what happens is, if there's an elevated level of cortisol, then what actually happens is the brain activity rises as you enter into REM sleep and then continues to rise until you wake. All right? And so often that problem of waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, thinking about work and being unable to sleep it's a symptom of elevated cortisol, which is part of you not being able to detach from work enough. Okay? So detachment becomes really important. So the reality is that the activity that you engage in could be anything as long as it allows you to detach. Could be anything. What are some of the things that now that you've I've mentioned this concept of detachment, what are some of the activities that you guys might already be doing to help detach? Throw them at me. What was that, sorry? Don't have emails on the phone. So that's a good mechanism to help you detach. Yep.
Listening to podcasts on the way home from work.
Okay.
Keeps your mind detached from cutting off from work to then focusing on podcasts, and kind of helps to clear your mind when you get home.
So listening to something, whether it's a podcast, whether it's music, something like that. The thing with podcasts, right, that I find is so often I'll detach from at a task level, but I'll be listening to something that is work related. So I'll be thinking about how am I then going to apply what I've just heard to my work. And so it's like a half detach, it's a semi-detachment rather than a full detachment. And now if you're listening to a podcast that's something totally not related to work, great, you're going to get the detachment. That's the great thing about music, right? So often we go off into our own little world when we're listening to music, because it is a full detachment type thing. What else? What are some of the other activities? What was that, sorry? Walk the dog can be great. Coach a basketball team. Yeah, awesome. You, again, anything that draws you in to focus on what you're doing allows you then to detach. A couple of others?
So mine's a funny one. At home, I cook tea. I'm the only one who cooks.
Yep.
And it helps me turn off because I focus on what I'm doing. When I travel for work, I'm not getting that routine.
Yep.
I find,
Hard, yeah, very, very much so. I've got my wife's cousin is the chief HR officer for Queensland TAFE. She's got a pretty big role, pretty heavy stuff that she does. She loves to cook. We all joke that she's a feeder, right? Because she just like always cooks too much. It's absolutely amazing, but that's how she switches off. And like she's kind of exhausted at the end of it, like it's physically draining for her, but mentally she gets recharged because she loves just being in her happy place in the kitchen. 100%. Okay, what else? Gym is great. The drive home can be good as long as you're not thinking about work. All right. The gym is great. It's often hard to be thinking about work and trying to solve problems when you're running, on the treadmill and you're trying to, like swimming is amazing for it because when I swim, I'm just focusing on counting strokes and trying to breathe and not swallow a mouthful of water and drown. Right. That's where my complete focus is. And therefore, I'm not thinking about work, right? So what I want you to do, really quickly, is I want you to in your booklets. Again, we're going to go 30 seconds to think about what is it that helps you to stop detaching from work. And in the next box there, what do you want to start doing? What do you need to stop doing? And what do you need to prioritize when it comes to activities that help you detach from work? Okay, so there might be new activities that you could do more of. There might be steps that you could take that stop you or prevent you from an inability to detach. That might be answering emails after a certain time at night. It might be removing your email app from your phone. All right. What do you need to stop doing that's going to allow you to detach? And then what do you need to prioritize? It's something that you might do every now and then, but you're not doing it consistently. So again, 20 more seconds to write, turn to the person next to you and have a conversation. So the next one of these three is relaxation. As you see in your books, all right, you flip the page, you got a little scale there. All right, how often do you genuinely feel relaxed? I want you to circle there. Is it never? Is it only on holidays? Is it once a month, once a week, or several times a week? Whereabouts are you currently? Put a circle or a cross, and then whatever you've used, use a circle or a cross to put where you want to be. Now, when we talk relaxation, right? Relaxation is, yes, it's relaxed. But we're talking more about kind of the mental relaxation, or more than just the mental relaxation. What we're talking about here is also the physiological relaxation. What we want to do is return our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous systems to a neutral state. We want to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, all right, and return it. What that means is we flush our body full of the cortisol, cortisone, adrenaline, noradrenaline, all those chemicals that are in our body that are released when we're stressed. Okay, we want to flush all of those things out. And so often, relaxation, it returns us to a neutral state, right? A de-stressed state, a relaxed state. Now, exercise itself might be a level of stress inducing, but what it does is it gets the heart moving, the blood pumping, and the movement of that blood around our body actually flushes out all the cortisol, cortisone. So post-exercise, we're often more relaxed than what we were beforehand. It's one of the things why exercise is so good. Anyone can relate to feeling more relaxed after you've exercised? Yeah, bunch of heads nodding. But it doesn't have to be exercise, right? It could be taking a long hot bath. It could be reading a really good book and kind of getting lost in that. A lot of the activities that allow us to recover from work actually tick multiple of these boxes. All right, so reading a really good book can help us to detach from work, but it also can help us relax from work. So again, I want you to think about what are those things. Who here uses Netflix to relax? Sorry. I want you to think about what you watch on Netflix. Some of the shows that you're watching. There is an army of people over in Hollywood that are trying to write these shows and make them in a way that engages you, that keeps you hooked so that you keep watching the next episode. How do they do that? By stimulating your excitement and threat systems. They actually cause you a small level of stress to get you hooked to try and find out what's happening next. So you're lying there on the couch trying to relax, but these things that you're watching are actually stimulating your nervous system so that you don't relax. And so all the research actually tells if you spend an hour lying on the couch watching whatever it is, you don't actually return to neutral. You don't actually get the quality relaxation that we're talking about. And so if you're using Netflix, there's nothing wrong with watching shows on Netflix, right? But if that's your primary mechanism to relax, then it's actually not being effective for you. You need to supplement that with some other things. Okay? Does that make sense? The final one here is mastery. Mastery is essentially setting and achieving goals. Or it's feeling a sense of control, a sense of progression towards a particular goal. It's around becoming masterful in whatever your chosen field is. And why that's really important is because in the pursuit of those goals, so often we get into this flow state where we lose time. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, really? 2 hours went by quick. So that whole time flies when you're having fun because you get so absorbed in the activity. And what happens is that in pursuing the goal, in pursuing that next level, right, and developing that skill set, whatever it is, one, you're totally focused on it, so you're detaching, and two, you are getting this sense of progression, which is actually building your self-belief in your own abilities. It's building your confidence. Your self-efficacy is what the term that we use in psychology. And that means that we're building ourselves up so that we are more confident that when we step back into the workplace, we actually have more belief in our own abilities and we can actually tackle whatever the hard challenges are. All right? So, yes, the fact that we're pursuing mastery allows us to kind of zone out from our work and focus on something else that is really beneficial to us, but that the building up of our own sense of self and our own self-belief really has a massive amount of contribution to our own recovery from work so that when we step back in, we can operate at a higher level. And so what are the goals that you have, that you're working towards? What are the activities that allow you to get totally sucked in? Maybe for enjoyment's sake, but you develop a skill set, you develop a sense of mastery in that particular area. And as I said, some of the activities are great because they allow you to do all three. right? Exercise, as I mentioned, is one. And I'm a big believer, if I could get one thing for people to do, it would be exercise more and more consistently. Because the benefits for your brain, your psychology, your well-being, your physiology, and therefore your work are there's so many, right? Exercise, generally, if you're doing intense exercise, it allows you to detach. Okay? Post-exercise, because you've flushed everything out, you're going to be in a more relaxed state. If you're setting goals, fitness goals, and you're moving towards them and achieving them, getting that sense of progression and mastery, then that's ticking that box off as well. And you do it with friends, and you're doing it with other people. You kind of get the social connection, social benefit out of it, and all those sorts of things as well. It ticks off multiple different things. But it doesn't have to be exercise. The activities could be anything as long as they tick those 3 boxes. So what I want you to do is take a moment again. When it comes to relaxation, what do you need to do? To start, to stop, and to prioritize. And what are those activities that help you get into flow state, where you absolutely just love them and you want to develop a sense of mastery towards them? All right, again, write it down in your books and then turn to the person next to you, have a bit of a conversation. So hopefully in those conversations you're hearing each other talk about the different things that you can do, and you might be able to spark some ideas around what you can do to detach, relax, gain a sense of mastery, and really be more intentional about recovering from work. What I want to do now really quickly is just show you the results of Holly's research that this presentation is based on. Okay, so in here you can see we've got workday demands up in the top right hand corner. We've got how people manage their energy at work. So we've got the work-based strategies, we've got the micro breaks. Then we've got work-based fatigue. The workday parasympathetic nervous system is what PSN is. Essentially that's looking at the body markers for stress. And then workday vitality, which is how much energy people felt that they had at work, right? Then in the afternoon, at home, we've got here the detachment, relaxation, and mastery, okay, that's happening there. So no surprise here, right, is that the higher the workday demands are, the greater your workload, the more pressure you're under, the more fatigued you're going to be at the end of the day. And the less likely you are to detach from work in the evening. The next thing that they found was if you're using workday strategies, you're going to be more fatigued at the end of the day, and you're less likely to relax or engage in activities that help you relax in the evening. Remember, the workday strategies are those ones where you are constantly working throughout the day, so you are more tired and fatigued. So therefore, you are less likely to have the energy to engage in activities that are designed to relax you. Next, looking at the workday PSNS, all right, so the more stressed you are, the less likely you are to engage in activities that provide you a sense of mastery. Whether it's a hobby, whether it's fitness related, whatever it is, the less likely you are to expend energy on gaining a sense of mastery. And then the final one here is the micro breaks. The more micro breaks you took, the greater your subjective level of vitality was. You felt like you had more energy. And as a result of that, you are likely to engage in activities that are going to help you recover from work. Okay? So that's just some of the results, right? This is not just me saying, hey, you should do this stuff and it's awesome. Like there's a whole lot of results that Holly and the team got there. And really what they surmised from that was this thing called a recovery paradox. And what the recovery paradox is, the higher your need for recovery, the less likely you were to engage in detachment and relaxation related activities. So if you're sitting there and you're going, Cliff, this sounds amazing, all this stuff that you're talking about, and in a perfect world, I'd love to do it, but I just don't have time. I can't afford to prioritize these things. But you're the person that's in need to do these things the most. Remember I said it's the things that get us through the tough times that we stop doing when times get tough. If you're going to be able to lead well under pressure, then you need to prioritize recovery activities. And the more you feel like you can't, the more you need to prioritize them. The other thing that I looked for was organizational support for segmentation. Now, this particular piece of research was done pre-COVID. So when they talk about the support for segmentation, they're talking about leaving work at work and actually taking time to be at home and recover and do all that sort of stuff at home. Now, in a post-COVID world, really the translation of this in terms of context, all right, is that the more supportive leaders are of their people prioritizing recovery activities rather than prioritizing segmentation, the more likely people will engage in them, all right? So if you as a leader representing the organization are supportive of your people engaging in recovery activities, they are going to be more likely to go home and do it. Does that make sense to people? The final piece to their research was that an energy conservation mindset. And when we talk about that, I haven't spoken about that today, but really what we're saying there is I've only got a certain amount of energy. And if I'm going to, I need to, every time I dish out energy, right, it's kind of lost. And so therefore I need to conserve as much energy as I can. If I've got a whole lot of work demands there, then I want to engage, or I want to spend all my energy on my work because that's where I get rewards, right? I don't have enough energy to go and exercise, to make healthy life choices, to do all those sorts of things. If you have that conservation mindset, right, you're less likely to engage in mastery-related activities. Whereas if you have a mindset where energy is a resource that I can invest and get a dividend in return, then you're much more likely to engage in recovery-based activities. Okay? So view energy as an investment. You need to expend energy to go and exercise, but the fact that you exercise, it gives you a whole lot more energy in return. All right? You might expend energy to go and have that coffee with a friend, all right, or that dinner with a friend, but doing that helps you to detach and social connection and all that sort of stuff that you actually kind of revitalizes your soul a little bit. And then the next day, you got more energy in return. So don't view energy as a conservation mindset. I put this one up here because I want to talk about the concept of surge capacity. It's all well and good to say, hey, you know, it's great when we're not under pressure, you know, for you guys, when you're not in peak period, that you can maintain all these healthy lifestyle choices and engage in these recovery activities and all those sorts of things. The reality is that there are going to be times like peak when you're going to have to surge. And when I talk about that, I go back to my days in the military when I was a patrol commander. And we had the concept of surge. When we hit the ground, if we were taking over an airfield and we had to establish control of the operating area, we needed to surge, right? We needed to clear all of that ground, and we need to do it as quickly as possible. And so we would identify all the possible areas where the enemy might be, all the possible entry points that the enemies might use, and we would go and we would clear them. And we would surge for a period of time. That could be up from 48 hours to up to a week. And we would go and we would operate at minimal sleep, doing maximum amount of work until we cleared everything and we owned the ground, right? And we had to surge. If there was an enemy attack, we would then have to surge again. But the thing that we couldn't do was maintain surge capacity extended long periods of time. Because when our officers tried to make us do that, this is what happened. All right, this photo is actually my patrol. It got wet. and we had a new junior officer that wanted to prove himself. So he was making us work stupid on an exercise. And he was maintaining surge capacity far longer than what he should have. And eventually, because we saw like we'd done our job, we knew that there was no point. Yes, we had to go onto sustainable tempo of operations, but there was no point maintaining surge capacity. And so we got demotivated. And literally, we hoochied up and just went, there you go. If you are pushing people too hard for too long, you're either going to, one, break them, or two, you're going to fully demotivate them. And so you can't maintain surge capacity. You can't maintain operating at a surge level. You need to maintain a surge capacity. And that means a gap. So the way I look at it is, if we go to this one, look at it a bit like this. This is your performance curve, right? Your level of performance on your y-axis, and across the bottom, it's the pace that you operate, the pressure that you're under, and the level of stress that you have. And we actually need a level of stress in order to perform well. We need some pressure to be able to perform well. But it gets to a point where we hit our absolute threshold, and then our performance starts to drop off. So really what we need to do is we set our maximum performance level where we should be operating at top performance below the absolute. Our threshold should be below the absolute. That way we don't break, that way our performance doesn't drop. And so for me, that's that dotted red line. That's where we want to get to, and we don't really want to go above that. That's our absolute threshold. That's where we should be operating at when we hit surge. Because if we go above that, we start to break, we start to make mistakes. Really, below that is where our sustainable level of work performance should be. That's our sustainable threshold. And in between there, that's our surge capacity. So if you are constantly saying, hey, I want to work up here, right, at your maximum performance threshold, then you enter into peak. If you're operating there before peak, you've got nowhere else to go before you start to break or you start to drop the ball. You start to drop the plates and they break. All right? So sustainably, to operate sustainable performance, you've got to operate at a level below that, which gives you the ability to then, and the capacity then, to engage in the recovery activities to manage your energy and your capacity levels. Does that make sense to people? And so as individual leaders, what you should be thinking about is, what are my warning signs that I'm going above my sustainable performance threshold? It might be, there's a friend of mine who his warning sign is he starts to forget where he put his keys. All right, and he's operating around, he's moving so fast, he's got, where are my keys? And for him, that's a trigger. And he goes, I need to slow down because I'm not just going to misplace my keys, I'm going to misplace decisions. And he's learnt that the hard way. So what are your warning signs? Mistakes, yeah. Ideally, you want to prevent those. So you want, what's the thing that's consistent that happens before I make mistakes? And here's the thing as leaders, right? Now think about your teams. Really for you, if you want to operate at that sustainable performance area or at that sustainable performance threshold, and you only go into your surge capacity and up to your maximum performance occasionally, then really it's your responsibility to help your people operate in the same as well. If you're looking across your people and you can see that they're operating right at that maximum level and they either are making mistakes or they're about to, then it's kind of up to you to say, hey, we need to have a conversation here. You need to peg it back a bit. How do you peg it back a bit and still achieve the results that the organization needs from you? All right? And that's when you take the messages around managing your energy and recovery and you start sharing it with them and helping them to identify what are their triggers and what are their warning signs so that they can start engaging actively and intentionally in their own recovery and their own energy management. Because you can be operating at your highest potential, but if all your managers in your area hit absolute maximum and keep on going, then your area suffers, regardless of how well you're doing. So it's up to you to help your managers stay below that. Does that make sense? So whenever my question is, what are you going to do with your team, right? Whenever I teach this sort of stuff to people about doing it with their team, I go through this 3-stage bit: demonstrate, teach, and reinforce. And the first bit, demonstrate, you never want to ask people to do something you're not willing to do yourself. This is the piece around integrity and authenticity. So you implement it first, and you talk to people about the things that you're doing for yourself. And then you teach the concept to people. And then what you're doing as you teach the concept, you can go, hey, remember that conversation that we had 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about this, right? And so you can point back to what you're already doing. In that way, you're actually building credibility for yourself as a leader, but you're also pointing them back to an example about what you're doing, a real world example in your space. And then you reinforce it. And so you follow up the conversation, all right, around what are you doing about it? How are you going with that? Are you being consistent in your commitment that you made? So what I want you to think about is, what are you going to do today with your teams? What are some of the ideas, the concepts, the behaviors, the actions that you've spoken about at your tables, that you've thought about in your head, that you think would be beneficial for your managers and their store teams to actually implement? And what are the conversations that you're going to have with them to follow that up? 30 seconds, write that down in your book, turn to the person next to you, have a quick conversation. So the principle that underpins all of my work, every single piece of work that I do, right? That one principle is, unless you can clearly articulate it, you can't be intentional about actioning it. When you apply it to this particular content, unless you can clearly articulate how you're going to maintain your own and your people's surge capacity, then you can't be intentional about actually doing so. If you can't clearly articulate how you recover from work, you can't be intentional about actually making sure you do recover from work. Okay? And so really what I hope today is that you got some ideas and some points that will help you articulate your plan of attack. And not necessarily going to do it here, but on your next page in your books, you've got the space to identify 3 goals, what you're going to do, why you're going to do them, how you're going to implement them, and then break it down to identify the next 3 steps. All right? The reality is, unless you take what I have shared today away and do something with it, then it's been a waste of time. All right? Time is my most precious resource. I hate wasting it. So make sure that you do that. What I wanted to give you guys time to do is ask a few questions before I just wrap this up. Okay, so does anyone have any specific questions? And I'm going to jump down from the stage about any of the content that we've had today. Yeah, Jim.
Are there varying levels of detachment when you're talking about getting away from work? are there any acceptable levels, or does it need to be complete attachment for that, getting away from work to be successful?
Yeah, so the question is, are there varying levels of detachment that are acceptable that help you to recover? And the reality is, yes. What I would say is that the more detached you are, the greater the recovery that you get. And so therefore, if you are simply working from home, the office is a stressful environment for you and you're able to detach from there, and you're still kind of every now and then jumping on and doing emails, just to kind of keep things moving, but you're kind of you're detached from the stressful environment, that's going to help recover to a degree, okay? But when you stop answering emails altogether and you throw the phone away and you detach completely, that's when you get the most benefit for recovery. Now for me, when I go camping, I'll turn the phone off, throw it in the car, and I won't look at it again for the next week. And at the end of that week, I'm fully recovered. So, that's complete detachment. I get full recovery. Partial detachment, you get partial recovery. Answer the question? Awesome. Anyone else?
Actually, I have a question. We tend to surge quite often, or they come up, we tend to get hijacked for the day. It can be
Yep.
a safety issue throughout the day. I know we need to schedule those micro breaks, but if you can't do that, come to the end of the day, is there any techniques that you would use just to pick yourself up and detach?
Yeah, so if you haven't been able to use micro breaks throughout the day, how do you kind of facilitate detaching and all that sort of stuff? That's where the end of day work routine becomes really good, right? And so for me, an end of day work routine often looks something like this. It's a kind of a quick scan and review around what did you achieve. So that's kind of motivating in yourself, right? You're kind of getting to understand what are the goals, what are the things I've ticked off, what did I actually achieve today? That's motivating. What's outstanding? What are the things that I still need to keep paying attention to tomorrow that I need to keep up? And what have I got on tomorrow? And so there's a bit of an awareness piece that you maintain. And if you can get that out of your head, right, and preferably on a piece of paper or some sort of plan, like whatever works for you, but you've thought about it and you've got a level of plan, it might be identifying what are your top 3 priorities for tomorrow. And you do that before you finish work. That means it's there, it's ready for you to go. You can hit the ground running tomorrow. You don't have to think about it at home. All right? So often will people just, trying to get that last task done, and then when they're out the door, and then on the way home or while they're at home and they're thinking dinner, what is it I've actually got to do tomorrow? And they're thinking about that, and so they're not fully detaching from work. So doing that sort of thing, just a kind of a situational awareness, identifying priorities, bit of a plan for tomorrow, and then shut everything down. And I'm a big fan of like deep breathing, right? It's kind of starting the relaxation piece. If you do a couple of, it might be a minute or just 5 to 10 really big deep breaths, close your eyes, just zone out. And it's starting that relaxation piece. The deep breathing starts the process of reducing cortisone in your body. So it starts that process. And once it's started, that can then continue the more you detach, the longer through the evening, right? So for me, it's a matter of review what you've achieved, review what's outstanding and what's incoming, and then shut everything down, start to relax, just breathe. Does that help?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I'm a big believer in those routines because they're regular activities that your body just automatically starts to respond to once they become habitual. Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
So when I'm coaching basketball, right, and you teach a team how to play, and you give them plays and everything like that, and when they're under the pump or they're playing someone better, the first thing I always notice is everything you just taught them completely disappears from their thought process, and it's all about them trying to do more, and they forget to work together.
Yep.
And I find work can be very similar when the pressure's on, and that's where safety
Yep.
becomes an issue because all the stuff they know they should do, they put aside, and that's where the problems start.
Yep.
So, to me, like, that's when stop everyone, and to me, having the break at then so they can settle down, then talk about it.
Yep.
The best way to go about it, or do you think going straight into what the problem is the better?
I would say it's not necessarily an either or, but a both and. There's some situations where you just go and attack the problem. There's some situations where it's much better to think. I would err on the case that more consistent reflection on what people are going through is going to be more beneficial. So the more consistent you are in having those reflective conversations, what were you having? What did you just notice? What was going on right there? What have you lost attention to? All right, what was the opportunities to actually apply what we were talking about? All those sorts of questions, the more you reflect and ask those questions, the more people will pick them up earlier in the future, right? And so building that reflection, it's kind of like why in team performance, we want to review our performance regularly so that we understand what's going on, what the opportunities, we can identify the opportunities moving forward earlier, we can apply the concept, whatever that is. Make sense? Cool. Is there somebody else? Yeah.
Yeah. Do different disc profiles have different ways to sharpen the axe?
Different disc profiles, different ways to sharpen the axe. What I would say is no, but different disc profiles are probably more likely to be drawn towards different activities that help them recover or help them manage their energy. Okay? If you think about a C-type style who's more introverted, all right, they're more that sort of things. They probably they're going to benefit from going outside and walking, all right. Whereas an S or an I is probably going to benefit more from going having a coffee with someone, right? The people versus task piece on there is probably going to influence that to a degree. That being said, the activities will benefit everybody, right? Just some styles will prefer some activities more than others. Cool? Awesome. Well, hey, guys, this is really just the start of a conversation, or really a continuation of the one in February. But what I want you to do is continue this conversation with your people, with your teams. And so what I want to do is to give you some extra resources to facilitate doing that. It's not just the booklet from today, okay? And this particular QR code is in your booklet as well. But if you want to scan that, really what I want to give you, 50 ways to manage your energy and recover from work. So if you're sitting there going, this sounds great, but I just don't know where to start, this particular worksheet has got 50 ways, 50 ideas that you can just start using and trialing to see what works for you. The next one is leadership tactics, team recovery, accountability by stealth. How do you help your team stay accountable to engaging in recovery activities without them feeling like you're overreaching, micromanaging, and being too intrusive into their world? All right, there's a bit of a strategy there. There's another one here around leadership tactics around establishing high performance environments, which is, I gave a webinar on that particular topic for SRG earlier in the year. Some of you might have been on that one, but there's some really great conversations that can spark. And finally, it's the first chapter of the book, Coaching Leader, which I have included because it gives this really great analogy in that first chapter around the dual responsibility of individual leaders being one to drive performance, but also to develop capability. And really what we're doing today, the topic that we're covering is around the sustaining of capability. And so it kind of ties in quite nicely. So as I say, fill in your details. Once you scan the QR code, we'll send those straight to your inbox and you can take them away and facilitate some of the conversations in your teams. I gave a version of this presentation to the SRG Soul Futures program for XLT at the beginning of the year. Yeah, I think it was in February or something like that. And I got some feedback recently that one of the leaders on that particular program, this message really resonated with her. She took it, she acted on it, she applied it. And over the space of 7 months, she's lost 30 kilos. She said that the application of these concepts had completely transformed her life. She has more energy and more motivation in the workplace. She has more happiness and satisfaction outside of work at home. She didn't just stop there. She went and shared this message and these concepts with her team. A number of them have lost a bunch of weight and making really positive choices around the intentional management of energy and recovery from work. And as a result, their whole team, their morale has significantly increased and their performance, the actual numbers and metrics have increased as well. And it's a really nice example of how you can take this and it can really transform a workplace. An atom is a tiny thing. It's the smallest of things. But when you energize an atom and you fire it at speed towards another atom and they collide, there is an exponential explosion as they release energy. And that explosion then creates a chain reaction as other atoms and other molecules in the area begin to release energy as well. That's the foundation of a nuclear bomb, the biggest of impacts. I hope that today, this message creates a bit of a chain reaction in your world. All right? It's my hope that I have transferred some of my energy to you so that you can go back and not only be high performing and more capable in your world, but you will able to transfer some of that energy towards your people to unlock their potential. And as a result, you, your people, and their teams won't just be more high performing at work, which will translate into, more profitable and high performing stores and regions. But it's also that you will be motivated to move towards becoming better leaders, transforming people into better versions of themselves as you lead, so that they go home and they are better husbands, fathers, sons, wives, mothers, daughters, friends, and we get better families, we get better communities, and ultimately a better world. So take this message today. I hope that it's inspired you. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference and that the conference motivates you and it energizes you, and then go home, make a difference, create a change, do great work. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Until next time, lead well. Glenn?